Week 7 in the NFL, and we're going over the waiver wire to help all those fantasy football players out there fill those starting lineups. We know we have 4 teams on a bye, but SI fantasy analyst Michael Fabiano here to identify the quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends that you guys should be picking up this week. Fabs, let's start off with the quarterbacks. We know guys like Lamar Jackson, Kirk Cousins, they're on a bye. Who are some of the replacements we should look at?
Well, Kirk Cousins, that was a roller coaster ride, wasn't it there? So, but Teddy Bridgewater is a very nice add, and you may be looking at me and saying, Fabs, wait a minute, he was terrible against Chicago. Yeah, he was. That's why he was a sit-em in my column. But in his previous 2 games, 20-plus fantasy points in both games. And look at the matchups upcoming for Teddy Bridgewater. He's got the Saints in Atlanta in the next 2 weeks. The Saints is a revenge game, so if he is out there, go pick him up. Now, quarterback is a very deep position. But there are some guys out there who should not be free agents, okay? If Gardner Minshew's still out there, go get him. If Ryan Fitzpatrick is still out there, go get him. Ryan Tannehill has been one of the best quarterbacks in fantasy football, and for some reason on ESPN, he's not even 60% owned. He needs to be 100% owned, guys. Justin Herbert coming off a bye, he needs to be owned. And if you need a quarterback coming up, Derek Carr's been pretty good, and if you're in a 2QB or Superflex league, he's probably gone already. But if you're in a 12-team league and you need a quarterback, that game against the Buccaneers in Week 7, well, that could end up being a high-scoring affair.
All right, let's move over to running back. Always a very thin position for fantasy football players. A couple injuries today. Joe Mixon left early on Sunday, did come back. Miles Sanders left early on Sunday, did not come back. What do you make of those backfields, and anyone there we should pick up?
And that's the one you want to target, the one in Philadelphia, and that would be Boston Scott. As you mentioned, Miles Sanders left the game with a knee injury. The Eagles have a short week. They play on Thursday night against the Giants. That's not good news for Sanders. So unless this is a mild knee injury, he could be out this week. So Boston Scott should be added across the board. He wasn't great earlier in the season, but we're talking about volume here. We're talking about the bye week, so he would be a flex starter. And then in Washington, J.D. McKissic. Now, I love Antonio Gibson. Don't get me wrong. But McKissic, 14 touches, 6 catches, 84 yards, over 14 points against the Giants. McKissic has 22 targets and 19 catches, Bill, in his last 3 games, and they play the Cowboys coming up. So McKissic could be a potential flex starter in PPR leagues. Some other backs to target. J.K. Dobbins is probably owned, but if he's not, you can go out and get him. Just keep in mind that Baltimore has a bye. This is sort of a grab them and see what happens because Mark Ingram was injured today. Gus Edwards also on that list. Damian Harris should be owned in more leagues. And you mentioned Joe Mixon. He did come back into that game, but this might be a good time for fantasy owners to go out and get Gio Bernard as a handcuff.
All right, let's go over to wide receivers because we've been mentioning a few guys. We've been mentioning a few guys the last few weeks. We're going to mention them again today because they're still widely available.
Yeah, Travis Fulgham, I mean, boy, this guy's come out of nowhere. And you look at the numbers, last week against Pittsburgh goes absolutely bananas. And then, well, he's got Baltimore, right? You can't play him against Baltimore. 6 catches, 75 yards, and 19.5 fantasy points. He was tremendous. Now, I know that Philadelphia was throwing it a lot because they were trying to erase a deficit still. Carson Wentz has got a lot of trust in this kid. And look at the schedule coming up. Giants on Thursday night, Cowboys, then a bye, and then the Giants again. So Fulgham needs to be added across the board. And T. Higgins, he's available in more than 50% of ESPN leagues. I don't get it. 8 targets, 6 catches, 125 yards, and almost 19 points against Indianapolis. And their defense is really good. Higgins has now had at least 6 targets in 5 straight games, including 32 targets over the last 4 weeks. He's better than A.J. Green. He's been just as good as Tyler Boyd, if not better. This kid needs to be owned across the fantasy landscape. Some other wide receivers to go out and get. Tim Patrick, he had another good game. 8 targets, over 100 yards against New England. And Stephon Gilmore was covering him for a good portion of that game, so he's worth an add. Adam Humphries also worth an add. So is James Washington. And then Marcus Johnson had a very strong game, but the Colts do have a bye coming up. So you may want to fade him, but if you're in a deeper league, he is certainly worth a look. And in that case, so is Zach Pascal.
All right, let's go over to tight end because a few of them have been emerging lately. Who do you have your eyes on for week 6 pickups? Or week 7
Trey
pickups?
Burton. Trey Burton is back on the radar, guys. I mean, 5 targets, 4 catches, 58 yards, 2 touchdowns, had 1 on the ground. and over 20 points against Cincinnati. Now, keep this in mind. The Colts have a bye, but tight end's very thin, so if you want to grab him now and maybe sit him down for a week and then maybe potentially use him rest of the season, some other tight ends to target. Irv Smith Jr., 5 targets, 4 catches, 55 yards. They also do have a bye. Minnesota does upcoming. Darren Fells has a touchdown in 2 straight games. Richard Rodgers could end up being a very sneaky play in Week 7. Again, the Eagles play on Thursday Night Football. Zach Ertz banged up. Dallas Goedert on IR, and the Eagles have a short week, so Rodgers could end up having some value. And then Anthony Fersker, I don't know that I'd pick him up, Bill. He kind of just ruined Jonnu Smith's fantasy value this week, but he went bananas. 9 targets, 9 catches, 113 yards, a touchdown, over 25 fantasy points. Again, I don't know that I'm picking him up. I feel like I have to mention him, though, because he had such a big game. But Jonnu Smith is clearly the top tight end there in Tennessee. I guess when Ryan Tannehill's going this good, everybody's worth adding for Tennessee, right?
Yeah, the Titans certainly looked great in that overtime game against the Texans. Ryan Tannehill, as you mentioned, one of the top 5 fantasy quarterbacks this season, but yet he's still available in too many leagues. I just don't get it. Fabs, you're going to have your stardom sit 'em this week. We'll also have custom player rankings. You can find it all by becoming a member of SI Fantasy Plus. It's only $14.99 a month. Go to si.com/fantasy for more info.